Frank was like, okay, well, I'm gonna train you to be a geopolitical forecaster, and so you're gonna go through my training. I was like, cool. And then, I got an email that day. I was like, intelligence analyst position.
Ooh, intelligence
analyst.
analyst.
Which tells you, like, I would be the worst spy because immediately as soon as I got that email, I was like, you know what I am? Hey, Mom, guess what? You know who's an intelligence analyst? Don't tell anybody.
Yeah, right?
But when we were training, I went out to Texas, which was like, so training and like, I don't know, I got an email and it was like, okay, you're coming out to training. And I was like, okay, sweet. It'll be like a weekend or something. And it was like a month. And I'm like, what? And like, it was like it was 3 other people that I was training with, to be an analyst. I feel like I should do this the entire time. I mean, honestly.
Air quotes?
Yeah, air quotes. I was a very, very advanced newsreader and future guesser. Learned a lot, though. I mean, fascinating work.
Yeah.
But like we were, me and 3 other strangers who turned out to be amazing. Shout out to Cheyenne, Xander, and Lawrence. Great people. So like we stayed in this like house in like suburbia outside of Austin. And every day we were just sort of like power learned geopolitics and like had to like read through this huge book about World War II. And then, we'd go over to Frank's ranch and he'd like hold globes at us and be like, this is the Philippines. And we're like, oh, cool. And he's like, well, it's a bayonet going into China. And like then tell us like all of the history of the Philippines and what America's geopolitical positioning around the Philippines was. And we were just like trying to pack as much geopolitical knowledge into our heads as possible. And each one of us kind of got some area of the world to look at, right? And so the goal of that was to take as much open source information about that area, so publicly available information, and try to determine based upon the constraints and imperatives of that country, what might happen, what they might want to do strategically, or what might occur to them, right? So
okay,
after 2 whole weeks of learning about geopolitics, I was like, my tinfoil hat was like firmly on. And I was like looking at Belarus and just dreaming about Alexander Lukashenko. At a certain point, I was just like, Alexander Lukashenko doesn't think about me nearly as much as I think about him, which is a shame. And I was like, oh, okay, so it's like Russia and Belarus. They're like right now anyway. They're like having this sort of weird war of words. Like I think Belarus was saying, you're using us as a 10 million person human shield against invasion from NATO countries and stuff like that. And then or Russia was like, shut up, or something. I can't remember that's the exact quote.
Right.
Vladimir Putin, shut up. And so I was like, I was, talking to Frank about this, and he's like, well, like, what do you think is gonna happen? I'm like, are they gonna fight or whatever? He's like, no. I'm like, well, why aren't they? And he's like, research it until you find out why. And I was like, what? Okay. And so just kept reading more and more, and then you find out that like the energy infrastructure of Belarus is like completely indivisible from Russian energy infrastructure. There's oil there, but it's unproven, so it would take years and years for them to actually get that oil out of the ground. So the constraint is they certainly can't break away from Russia. They can't have a war with Russia. So why are they having this public war of words? And at that point, that's when real analysis happens, is you're looking at what is actually going on when you know what the constraints and imperatives are.
Okay.
He sort of trained us to have this working model of the world, and you break that down into whatever the constraints and imperatives of major nation states are. And by major, I mean the people who sort of wield the dominant economic, military, social media powers, right? And so every nation has a certain amount of imperatives, things they have to do, things that they're forced to do, and then they're constrained by certain things. So, I mean, using the United States as an example, it's like, well, the imperative is to maintain the ability to project power across the Atlantic and the Pacific simultaneously. Constraint might be something like dwindling middle class. So economically, we might not be able to support that power projection over a certain amount of time. And so you can start to look at how a nation will behave based upon what their imperatives are and what their constraints might be. And what that ends up making is a model of the world where you have, as he termed them, fault lines and flashpoints. So certain areas of the world where there might be this tectonic shift of power, where there are these areas that if something is going to change the power relationships in the world, a flashpoint, it will happen there.
So you're talking about like countries' ambitions and what they're trying to do and what the downside of that ambition is. So like an example would that like if you relate that to America, us spending trillions of dollars on the military and the dwindling middle class is what takes the downside of that. Like we have roads with potholes, but we're spending $16 trillion a year on the military.
Yeah, so it's less the things that are blocking us, but the things that are like holding us back, right? We're constrained by if we have a dwindling middle class, that also means that we have a dwindling tax base to pay into military adventurism.
Got it.
Some in fact a good deal of like geopolitical constraint is actually just damn geography. It's incredibly hard to fight a war in Afghanistan as history has told us constantly, and it's just because there's so many damn mountains. Like it's Alexander the Great was turned back, Napoleon, Russia, the United States.
We have the best geography, right?
Well, I mean, best according to what, right?
Like war, because we're surrounded by the two oceans.
Yeah, so we've got. I mean, we have like I can't remember which geopolitical guy called it this, but he called the United States this sort of the idea of this inevitable empire, right? And the idea was that we have so many natural features that make us highly defensible. You've got the Appalachian. I'd say Appalachian. I'm from California. We have those mountains over there. We've got this robust system of arable land and rivers, which allows for incredible amounts of agriculture to happen right in the center of our country, which is obviously highly defensible. Huge lakes on top of us, a damn desert beneath us, Rocky Mountains bracketing everything. So invading the United States is a genuinely like insane thing to do. Right. We're also all super heavily armed. So like yet another reason.
Right.